Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining our kickoff session for National Postdoc Appreciation Week in 2024. I'm Tom Kimbus. I'm Executive Director of the National Postdoctoral Association, and we at the NPA are thrilled to have so many events taking place this week to celebrate the achievements, the hard work, and the dedication of postdocs across the country. If you haven't done so already, please take a moment to review the NPAW calendar that we host here at the NPA using the link that's in the chat. Before we meet our kickoff event speaker, I have a few announcements for you. First, many of you are familiar with the NPA's virtual equity summits that have taken place over the last few years. In 2021, we launched that series with our Gender Equity Summit, and that was followed the next year in 2022 by our Race and Ethnicity Equity Summit. Last year, we held the NPA International Equity Summit, and this year I'm excited to announce that we'll be having a 2024 Accessibility and Inclusion Equity Summit. It will take place on Friday, November 8th from 1 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. It will feature 4 different sessions covering issues of neurodiversity, disability, accessibility, and inclusion in the postdoctoral world. We'll have outstanding panelists and moderators on this important group of topics. And as always, the Equity Summit is free to all, regardless of your membership status with the NPA. So registration for that event is now open. My colleague Christy is dropping that in the chat. Please be sure to register for yourself and spread the word to your colleagues and peers and anyone that could benefit from learning more about the importance of accessibility and inclusion for postdocs. You can always access this link later via the NPA homepage. Today is also the kickoff of a new NPA Postdoc Needs Assessment Survey. It's an important survey, and it's important. It helps us understand what issues postdocs are facing today, as well as keeping us at the NPA current with your needs and understanding year-to-year trends in those needs. If you're a postdoc, please make your voice heard by completing this brief survey. If you're a postdoc office leader or another member of the greater postdoctoral community, please be sure to share the survey with your postdocs. Last year, the NPA Needs Assessment Survey results kicked off the first meeting of the NIH Working Group on Re-envisioning NIH-supported postdoctoral training. So these results are important and they are disseminated. We'll make sure to share these results with the NIH, the NSF, and the National Academies as well. The survey also helps drive NPA programming for 2025, making sure that we're providing you with the professional development tools needed to respond to those issues or barriers that you face. Participants also have the opportunity to win an Amazon gift card as an extra thank you from the NPA. The link once again, or you can visit the NPA homepage for more information. Through the NPA Postdoc Council, we have 2 opportunities for you. This week, we host the first ever NPA Postdoc Town Hall on Thursday as part of NPAW. During the town hall, participants will discuss various topics relevant to postdocs, whether as individuals or within postdoc associations, to help connect early career researchers to other institutions that have similar goals or experiences. Participation is for postdocs only, and you can sign up using the link in the chat. In addition, the Postdoc Council itself is seeking applications for 6 new members to represent the voices of postdocs throughout the NPA. These national leadership positions will help provide guidance to the NPA leadership from the postdoc perspective. Applications are due September 27th, and more information is in the chat. Lastly, although our next NPA annual conference is not until next spring, a few important notes on that event. First of all, we'd love to have you join us on March 21st and 22nd up in Boston at the Hilton Park Plaza Hotel. Registration will open next month, early October, so look for communications from the NPA then. The abstract submission period for concurrent sessions and posters is open right now, with a deadline of September 30th. This year, we're encouraging submissions for those abstracts along 5 different tracks, all of which can be found on the submission site. We also have applications for NPA scholarships, which can help offset the cost of travel or childcare, and those are due a week later on October 7th. This year, the conference title sponsor is once again Seattle Children's Research Institute. Thank you to SCRI for their continued support for the postdoctoral community. And 2 other early and continued sponsors include MDPI Canada, which is bringing us our poster session in Boston, and the University of Chicago, which is sponsoring one of our lunches. We invite you to consider sponsoring the NPA conference, which has great opportunities for any organization looking to support our work. Please spread the word as our conference is dependent on strong support from the greater postdoctoral community. Now it's a true pleasure to introduce this year's kickoff speaker, Dr. Rashada Alexander. Dr. Alexander provides strategic leadership for the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowships Program, or STPF. With a team of 20 staff and $16+ million annual budget, she administers programming and professional development for more than 250 fellows annually in the executive, judicial, and legislative branches of the U.S. government. As an STPF alum, she puts her experience to good use in leading the next evolution of the program to ensure it continues to excel in connecting scientific expertise with policymaking. She joined AAAS from the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, or FFAR, where she optimized and streamlined operations and assessed the impact of their research funding. Before that, she was a program director in the Division of Research Capacity Building at the NIH, and 2 of her 10 years at NIH were as an STPF fellow. Dr. Alexander earned her Ph.D. in chemistry from the University of Kentucky, and she's a proud alum of Youngstown State University, where she earned her bachelor's degree in chemistry. She resides in the DC metro area with her husband, enjoys action movies of questionable quality, doing silly dances even if people are watching, and gadgetry. Please note that you can ask questions of Dr. Alexander throughout her talk using the Q&A function on Zoom. And that Q&A button is sometimes listed under the More tab on your Zoom interface. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Dr. Alexander.
Thank you so much, Tom. And thank you again to you and to the whole of the NPA for thinking enough of me to invite me today to be able to speak to y'all and to kick off National Postdoc Appreciation Week. So hello, everyone. I'm honored to be with you, and I appreciate y'all taking some time out of your day to spend it with the NPA, getting ready to kick off Appreciation Week and with me. So I like to know that y'all are awake and that this is meeting the need and actually you're hearing it and whatever else. So if you are comfortable sharing the reaction emojis and such in Zoom, feel free. I don't mind those at all. It's helpful to me because in virtual spaces, I like to know that I'm connecting with y'all and that y'all are hearing me. So feel free to throw up some emojis if you're hearing something I'm saying. If you got questions, as Tom mentioned, you can ask questions throughout, and he gave you the specifics about where to find the Q&A. And the NPA team has been kind enough to help me manage the questions as we're going. So we'll do our best to address them all. I want to make sure that this is fit for purpose and is useful for y'all. So if y'all can give me some emojis, reactions, letting me know that you heard what I'm saying, you can hear me okay, and we're ready to get started. Can I see a little something? Tom, can folks do reactions, or did I just ask people to do something that they can't do?
I think
Hey,
they can.
look, I see you. I see you. Thank y'all. Thank y'all. Appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to get started. And shift us over into presentation mode. Okay. All right, everyone. So I'm getting started. And Tom, Christy, Amy, y'all let me know if there's any technical issues on my end, and I'll be happy to come to turn my camera off to make sure that we can continue with the presentation. So I am coming to y'all as the director of the Science and Technology Policy Fellowships at AAAS, which is the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Many of you likely know AAAS because it publishes the journal Science, which is a well-known journal in the science and technology fields. But it also does a lot of other things, and I'm going to talk with you about some of those, and I'm also going to talk with you about what the program is that I get to oversee here at AAAS. But overall, before we even get to any of those things, what I want to talk with y'all is about the topic at hand for this Appreciation Week: owning your career and having some level of self-advocacy about what you're doing and how you're doing it. So when Tom and the team shared with me what the theme was, I was excited because actually, so the NPA was important in my own professional development. And I just want to put a quick plug in. If you were not already involved with the NPA, please do get involved. It's a great space to meet other folks in the postdoc training period that are trying to find their way too. and are trying to evolve and be as effective as they can. So please, if you are not already involved with them, please do that. It was one of the first places where I began to get a sense of what kind of professional interactions would be useful for me. Like honestly, the NPA was the first place where I actually had to learn how to navigate a conference call, which is now part and parcel of just how folks do business in professional spaces. So it was a great opportunity, and I strongly suggest you and your institutions that y'all get engaged and become a supporter and participant as swiftly as you can. So owning your career. So there's a phrase that I hear a lot. In theory and practice are the same. In practice, they are not. And I've heard it attributed to like 4 different people, which is what I mentioned here. But I think that whoever may have said it, it is experienced by all of us. That there's a thing that we will often train to do something, prepare to do something. I hear parents talk about this a lot. People in relationships, new relationships talk about it. Like there's a way that you think it's supposed to go, and then there's the way that it actually goes. And I think it's really important if you're trying to figure out how to navigate those. I think people often call them like liminal spaces. They're the kind of spaces in between, maybe milestones or big things that happen. It's really important that you recognize the difference between maybe what you thought is going to happen and what will actually happen. And you start figuring out how to be intentional in navigating that. So I'm going to share with y'all from those perspectives, my own experience, my professional experience, because that's the place where I can tell you about some of the ways that I've tried to operate in hopes that it is of use to you and what I have found that helps. And the 2 big things that I'm going to be hammering in are intentionality and resilience. Intentionality in terms of being clear-eyed and purposeful about how you seek to use your time and where you seek to engage yourself and engage with others. And resilience, some level of elasticity. How much can you deal with difficulties and pivot and be able to stretch and be able to adapt, trying to build that into how you plan and how you move. And then some resources that I hope will be useful to y'all. Y'all hearing me so far? Ready to get started? Give me a few emojis real quick so I know. Thank y'all. Appreciate you. All right. So my first slide, I'm going to talk with y'all a bit about my own journey because that's the best lens that I have. So I started off as an undergraduate. I wasn't born as an undergraduate. Like I started off as a child and then I grew and became an undergraduate at Youngstown State University, as Tom mentioned. And then my graduate work was at the University of Kentucky, which is where I got my PhD in chemistry. I'm going to go through these different stages, but I'm imagining in a little more detail, but I'm imagining as y'all look at least the first part of it, there's probably some similarities you have with me. Some of y'all are likely in first, second, maybe third, I don't know, however many postdocs you might have done, but your undergraduate, your graduate careers are likely to have some similarities. And I'll talk about some of the things that I was learning as I went through these stages. And now it ends with me being, I ended up having a placement because I was an alum of STPF. I got to be a health science policy analyst at the National Institutes of Health. Then I got to be a special assistant and later a program director. As Tom mentioned, I came to AAAS from the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, and I'm now the person who gets to lead the S&T policy fellowships here at AAAS. So how did all of that happen? So my undergraduate degree, and Tom and Christy, when I see people in the waiting room, I'm just admitting them. And I don't know if that's what I'm supposed to do, but I don't know how to not do that when I see it on my screen. So if y'all don't want me to do it, send me a message telling me you don't, because otherwise I'm going to admit these people. Okay, so my undergraduate degree, Youngstown State, I first decided I wanted to get into the sciences because I had a chemistry professor, Mrs. Knipe, in the 10th grade when I took chemistry at my high school. And she threw a large chunk of sodium into a large beaker of water and it blew up. For those of you who may not remember or might not know, sodium in its natural state, so when it is not bound to a salt or anything else, when it's not table salt in that form, when it's just sodium as a mineral, sodium as an element, it is very reactive with water. So that explosion told me, this is where I want to be. You just threw a big chunk of something into water and it blew up. And I'm so excited. And I want to understand why and how that happened. And what else can that teach me? What else can this field help me understand? And so I got my undergraduate degree, but like a lot of people, I think, or at least I know I felt like this and knew a few other people too. I knew that I liked science, but I didn't know if I could graduate with that undergraduate degree and get a job I liked. And it was important to me to like my job because I genuinely think if you don't like your job, you're probably not going to make a lot of money at it, and it's kind of miserable, and I didn't want to be miserable. So I felt like after I finished my undergraduate degree, like I gotta learn more so that I can get a job that I like and that I can do comfortably and confidently. And so then I went to graduate school. And graduate school, as it is for many of us, is it can have some trauma in it. It will have growth and understanding and learning, but it can have some harder parts too. And some of the things that I started learning in my graduate career were some of the things that moved me. And some of those things were things like or organizations like the NPA. I got very involved with graduate student organizations, the Black Graduate and Professional Student Organization Association. I got involved with the Graduate Student Association because I was starting to learn that I was smarter and faster and more capable when I had multiple inputs, when I had multiple ways that I was interacting, ways that were specific to my graduate work and specific to things beyond my graduate work. So I got to the end of graduate school and I said, okay, so now I do know more, and that's great. But I don't think I want to go into an academic tenure track position, which is often considered in terms of training, unfortunately, the default, even though statistically speaking, it is often the less likely career when you look at the ways that folks with STEM training, and when I say STEM, I mean science, technology, engineering, mathematics, medicine, and related and relevant training often go into. So I knew that I didn't want to go that track. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to do that. So I actually applied at one point. So I went and I did a postdoc at the University of Kentucky. And that was where I really cemented my knowledge that I did not want to stay at the bench. That was not the best thing for me to do. I wanted to keep benefiting science, but the bench was not the best way to do it. And I unsuccessfully applied for this program that I now get to lead. I was quite green, as I'll put it. I had a lot more to learn about the realities. I think there was a lot between the theory and the practice that I was still figuring out of what it means to communicate about science, what it means to advise on policy, on regulations, on legislations and statutes. But I knew that I wanted to get a little bit more time in a research space and have it be, because my first postdoc was not, it didn't feel like the most nourishing environment. So I wanted to go someplace that felt a little bit more like it was going to help me evolve into the next version of Rashada, whatever that meant. So that was where I did my second postdoc at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And that was where I realized, because I had gotten involved with the National Postdoc Association and my local postdoc association, I started to realize, oh, I want to go into science policy. I also knew that that was sort of like saying, essentially, I want to go into medicine. There's so many different facets of it. It can mean so many different things, but I knew that I wanted to start learning. So that was where I started doing something that I will encourage each and every one of you to do, which are informational interviews. Often can feel like cold calling. You're reaching out to people who don't necessarily know you personally, but they're doing something that you find interesting. They're doing something that moves you and you want to know more about it. You have not met me. I have just talked to y'all for probably about 10 straight minutes about myself. People will talk about themselves, especially if you can communicate to them that there's something that they can share with you that could be useful to you. People will happily take time to talk with you. So informational interviews are a great way to start to not just to start, but to continue to understand and to intentionally navigate your career by talking with people who are doing things that you find interesting. So then, as I mentioned in that last slide, I got to become a part of the STPF program. And that was amazing to me. And I was placed at the National Institutes of Health, the Office of Extramural Research. That is the office. Those of you who get NIH funding, you can mention that NIH funding as an example. So most people who are getting NIH funding are getting it, they are not on an NIH campus. They are in the extramural space. So that is the space where NIH is giving millions and in some cases billions of dollars to academic institutions, universities, things like that, places where folks are often doing research and are training the next generation of the STEM workforce. So I got to be placed there, and that's where they set all the policy for all of those things that happen off of NIH's campuses. And it was a great opportunity. I got to be there for 2 years in the Office of Extramural Research as a fellow. I learned some rough lessons about myself. I got some harsh feedback, and harsh, I mean, it was harsh for me to receive, but it was real useful. and gave me a lot of insight about myself, how I could improve, where I was growing, and where I might like something or I might not like something, might not like doing it at all. I networked, and those informational interviews that I just mentioned to you all, those came into that as a really beneficial tool. I reframed for myself because it made sense. I don't know about a lot of y'all. I don't like the word networking. Like, we all have to use it a lot, but it isn't always a comfortable consideration for many of us. It feels a little bit like you're going to schmooze with people, or you're going to go to parties and try to work a room or something like that. And that's kind of gross for a lot of us. What I am, though, I'm an introvert. That's just, I like to decompress with just myself or just a few people. Like, I like to spend time alone. But I am inherently curious. Nosy is what my mom would have called it when I was a kid, and my grandmother too. But I am very curious. I want to understand things and I want to help people. And those gave me, just using that framing, to be like, oh, when I go into these meetings or into these spaces, I can go ask people lots of questions about themselves. I can um I can go up to this person. I can tell them I like what they're doing. I'm curious about it, and I can actually then learn more just by expressing that curiosity. And the chances are that they are going to receive it well. And so I reframed that, and that was really beneficial to me. I decided post fellowship that I wanted to pursue a permanent position at NIH. And so I started thinking about other options, and that was again where the informational interviews were super helpful. I want to mention too, some of the things. I know I said I learned some hard lessons about myself. One of the lessons I learned, and I'll just give you a real candid example. I had to give a talk once to a group of folks about a sensitive topic. And I went in there and I thought it was a situation where I was just going to tell people about it. Often, sometimes, how we as STEM professionals think that if people just know about the scientific evidence, that will change all the decision making, that will help everything. If people just know, then they will change their behavior. And I got my feelings hurt in that meeting. Those people ate my face off. And one of the reasons that it happened was because I had not taken the time to know and consider my audience. And that is a key thing about your professional opportunities, is understanding that you don't know everything. And so any space that you go into, it will be benefited by you staying curious and not getting furious because you don't understand or you're frustrated or you can't see it. Asking people questions, asking them to help you understand, is so crucial. And often, if you are finding that you're the place you want to go into, maybe there's a particular arena that you're interested in exploring, that oftentimes you won't know everything about it. And so that's a space where taking that as a learning opportunity, owning it as a place where you want to be strengthened and you want to learn, can often play in your favor in a number of ways, not just in terms of you learning more and becoming that much sharper and smarter, but also in terms of demonstrating that intent to other folks. So being very candid about the fact that you want to learn and you want to grow. And so then my STPF experience, I stayed on at NIH. I was very excited to have the opportunity to do that. And I also continued to think about how else could I grow? How else could I learn? And that is when an opportunity to be the special assistant to the deputy director of NIH. So the deputy director at that time was Dr. Lawrence Tabak. He recently finished a stint, finally, as the acting director of the National Institutes of Health, prior to Dr. Monica Bertagnoli being confirmed as the current permanent the current permanent director of NIH. And so working with Larry was a great opportunity because I got a lot of different views and perspectives of an agency. NIH, if you're not familiar with it, is 27 different institutes and centers, and they are 27 different institutes and centers. So getting a sense of the corporate landscape of NIH and all these different institutes and centers and what they did and how they navigated, and not just how they functioned as institutes, but how they connected with researchers, with staff at NIH, within staff at NIH, but what were the relationships with researchers outside of NIH? What were the relationships with other folks in other parts of the federal government? So for instance, there are parts of NIH that work more closely than others with the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, or with the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. So seeing what those relationships were with other agencies, there was a lot of learning there that was really beneficial for me. And then I realized that I wanted to understand. So working at the top of an organization can be very reactive. And that is good, but it also gives you a little bit of yearning about, well, what's it like when I can be more proactive, when I can plan and I can seek to coordinate things in service of a particular goal. I have a little bit of time to think so I can develop programming. I can think about what I want to do, and I can be intentional about looking to work towards that and to set it up. And so that was an opportunity that I was able to really put that into motion as a program director at the National Institute of General Medical Sciences, which is also known as NIGMS. If any of you are familiar with the ARACTA program that teaches, that gives postdocs an opportunity to sharpen and strengthen their teaching skills and capabilities while they are doing research, that's one of the institutes that's the institute that supports that. So I got to work there, and I took a lot of opportunities when they came to me to really do all the things I could to coordinate the processes and policies across my division to help it work better. I really like to optimize. That's kind of my jam in life. And so this was a space where I got to do that. Then I started thinking about, well, gee, what else could I do? Where else could I go? And that was when I started wondering, well, what if somebody with my federal experience and insight took those capabilities to another sector, private, nonprofit, industry, whatever, because the federal government is a noble space, but it's not going to solve all the problems. So what if I took my skills and understanding of it into other places and looked at ways to facilitate or to support it solving, to support the solving of problems from different perspectives in different sectors. So I was fortunate enough to get hired on as the operations and impact director at the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, where again, I got to do more of what I had started doing in that previous NIH position, which was optimizing the policies and processes. So I got to push out the organization's first ever impact report that looked at the funding model of what the organization does, its partnerships, and its model for partnerships, and put that up and illuminate that at a higher level. And I also got to make sure that the organization was functioning well by putting in or establishing human resource functions and processes for renewal applications, things that a grant-making organization often needs, but are not always in place. So I got to see about how we could continue to optimize the organization and its functioning. And then I learned about this position, which the fellowship, and I'll talk about it a little bit more, it was instrumental to me in terms of my career and my life. And so I don't know what I would have, I don't know what person Rashada would have been without it. So the idea that I could potentially lead it was sort of a challenge and an opportunity I couldn't turn down. So I pursued it and was fortunate enough to get selected. And so now I get to lead it into its next evolution. The program is 50 plus years old. It turned 50 last year. And so now I'm thinking about what are we going to do for the next 60 years? Like, what are we going to talk about at the 60th anniversary and the 70th and the 80th? And that's a heck of an honor. So what I've learned, and I'll keep learning, balance your confidence and your humility. As you are figuring yourselves out, you're figuring out what the difference might be between theory and practice. There are going to be spaces where you are the person who knows the things. You are the person who knows what's going on, and you have the most subject matter expertise that is relevant to the issues at hand. And there will be other times where you don't know squat in a particular situation, right? You remember I talked earlier about staying curious. That's where you can, it sort of becomes a superpower. Sometimes I think for us as folks trained in the sciences and technical spaces, not knowing is a bad thing, but sometimes acknowledging that you don't know and you want to learn can be one of the most useful things you can do. So figuring out how to balance that confidence and that humility. There's a difference between doing important work and being around important people. It doesn't mean that it isn't important sometimes, that appearances don't matter, and that the work that you will do around or with important people isn't important. It is. But understanding that difference can often keep you from getting as frustrated as you can when you find yourself doing something that doesn't feel as granular or as useful as you might want. So getting a clear understanding of that can often help you not just prioritize and assess your work, but it can also help you assess opportunities too. Because sometimes you might find that something you want to do, it's going to put you with important people, but it's not necessarily going to allow you to do important work. A lot of opportunities will allow you both, and then you've got to manage and navigate both of those. Focus on progress and not perfection. Something that I've been reciting to myself over and over again is imperfection plus learning equals progress. You want to make progress. Things will not be perfect. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good is another way of saying this. Sometimes we focus so much on what we think is supposed to happen that we'll make ourselves sick to our stomachs, focusing on what we think should happen. Again, this is about how you operate in theory versus practice. Sometimes getting really stuck on what the theory is and how it could have been perfect will have you missing valuable progress that you are making. You won't see the forest for the trees. Learn how to read a room, situational cognizance. Understand who you're talking to and what you're talking to them about. That experience I mentioned where I got my face eaten off during my fellowship, this was a place where situational cognizance would have been really helpful. And I continue to hold it up as a really important thing for folks to build. Get familiar with your sphere of control. You're not going to control everything. You can't do everything. You can't make everything what you want it to be. Figure out what you can control and put your energy there. Sometimes I find that I will get really frustrated about a particular issue. And when I really look at it, it turns out that I abdicated my power in search of power somebody else had that wasn't ever going to be mine. And so oftentimes getting familiar with and sitting with that sphere of control is going to be key for you being able to, again, maximize your impact. Intentionality and resilience, I've already mentioned those words multiple times. Prioritize them. Think about what you want. I'm going to share with you some tools that I've found that have worked really well for me in terms of helping me to do that, make it more than words, moving beyond just the words. So prioritize those things because those can often help. Has someone got a question? Okay, I'll keep talking, but if y'all got a question, let me know. Sometimes being specific in those ways can really save you a lot of time and a little bit of internal anguish when you're trying to figure out what you're going to do next and how you want to do it. And be open to transformations, big and small. I have found that when your mindset is such that you are recognizing that things will change, just from the outset, you start off recognizing that things will change. You're often going to be more open to the opportunities that can look a little bit scary because they look like change, because they are change. So being open to transformations is pretty much, it's going to serve you well consistently. So what can help? This is where I'd like to talk with you about tools. Are y'all still with me? Can everybody still hear me okay? Tom, Christy, everybody can hear me. I'm moving along with the slides. I'm getting a little bit of lag on my end, so I just want to make sure that y'all can, that we're good. Okay, I see thumbs up. So what can help? I'm sharing with y'all a little bit of something that I did for myself, a career memorandum. There are lots of different ways that you can do this. My career memorandum was, I was at a point in my career, it's around 2018, where I was trying to figure out what did I want to do and how did I want to do it and where did I want to go? I was trying to figure it out. There are lots of things that can help you do this. Okay, there we go. I think there's a little bit of unmuting happening, and so I'm catching bits and pieces of it. Individual development plans, that is something that the NPA had a strong hand, and I would kind of say champion leader, leader in that space, making sure that folks realize the value of having an individual development plan, having some sort of professional development plan when you're going into a postdoc. Carry that into other spaces. In the fellowship, we have what we call a fellowship impact plan that does sort of the same thing. It sets out what you're seeking to do, what you're trying to do in this opportunity, how you want to grow, how you want to evolve. Performance reviews and positions are often a good way to do it too. Sometimes they come across as check boxes, but they can be much more than that. They might be treated or relegated to that, but just because someone else doesn't pay attention to it doesn't mean it doesn't have value for you, especially if it can help you to articulate what it is you're seeking to do. And my career memorandum is just another version of that. So I did this and I gave myself, I broke out like, what was the purpose? What do I want? I want to lay out my expectations and desirables. What are the logistical expectations? What do I expect day to day? What do I expect in terms of the framework, the concept of whatever I'm doing? I let myself, you see that little black box down there where it says I can blank figure it out? There's a swear word in there. And the reason is because I swear. And I needed this document, this memorandum, to be reflective of me as a person, how I think and how I process things. Give yourself the freedom to express it in your voice. You don't have to share it with everybody. You can always clean it up. You can always make it something that's a little more formal and a lot better, a more cultured and curated version of yourself. But start there. Start with the bare bones so that you can get as clear as possible about what you want to do. And it also can help you see the bigger picture of who you are and what you want to do. Because sometimes you will find that actually your career is a vehicle for you to really engage in your purpose. If that's something that, if that sort of thinking aligns with you. And so you want to think about what kinds of things are going to align with your purpose. Because sometimes you'll have a job that doesn't necessarily align with your preferences, and that's okay. But knowing that again is key, because then you can adapt smartly. So just following in on that, what I talked about with the memorandum. So clarity, the intentionality I talked about, clear eyes, your priorities, your career, what you want and what you don't want. The career memorandum, the individual development plan, those can be spaces to hold that. The resilience, give yourself an opportunity to paint the progress. If any of y'all have ever read anything by Brene Brown, she is a social scientist and has worked a lot in spaces around what I would call like the um, organizational management, but in a much more human way, a much more human facing way. Think about, she talks about painting done. Think about what done is. Think about what progress is for yourself, for success for yourself. I encourage you to think about what a particular kind of progress and success could be. Don't put on yourself, I'm going to become the best blankety blankety blank I can be, and I'm going to do it in this much time, and I'm going to do it this way. That's a great way to make yourself very tired. Don't do that to yourself. But think about what would the progress that you want to see look like? What could success look like in these spaces? Where can you adapt? Where might you need to build some skills? Maybe you want to work in international spaces, but you've never stepped foot outside of the US and you haven't necessarily had research collaborations. Or you're from another country and you're trying to figure out how to go to a different country. Or you're in a whole different field and you're trying to figure out how to get there. This is an opportunity for you to kind of build the stair steps, the stairway to get where you want to go, and think about what are the discrete pieces that need to be there. I also found something else to be really helpful for myself, which is a personal user guide. So I call it my interaction guide, because calling it a user guide when I give it to people makes me feel like I'm a screwdriver or something, which is a little weird. So I call it my interaction guide. But this, I've included links here, and the presentation can definitely be shared with you all. But there are tools on LinkedIn and a number of other places that are focused on professional development that talk about how to do that. That can be a really useful document because it helps you know yourself just a little bit better. Any space where you can learn yourself is a useful thing, because you're the only you're all you can control. And if you've ever been in front of a really good Krispy Kreme shop that has the hot light on, you know, sometimes you don't even control yourself. You control yourself as best you can, but you are the only thing, you are the only person that you have significant influence over in a lot of the spaces that you're navigating as a professional. So understanding yourself is such a powerful approach to being able to do whatever you want to do effectively. Okay. So I've talked about how I learned these things. I want to talk really swiftly about the fellowship to give you all some information, and I'm happy to provide you more. And there's links and such in the presentation if you want to learn more about the program. This is a program, I think it gives a lot of people a space to learn about themselves. I know it did for me. To the left are the particular competency areas that we look at when we're assessing people for the program. And thank you to whoever dropped that link in there. Thank you, Chris. This is, you see over here that these different areas are considered. The space that I think is the most powerful to pay attention to is the communication, interpersonal, and outreach skills. This is where a lot of what I got to experience and do within the National Postdoc Association and my local postdoc associations were so helpful, because it really helped me understand that sometimes the skills that are beneficial in non-bench research careers or environments are not always recognized as valuable in those environments, but they are. very valuable. Sometimes those skills are referred to as soft skills, which I think for some people they sort of dismiss them in that way, but they're not soft skills. They're hard skills. They're hard to build sometimes, and sometimes hard to keep sharp. But they're very important because those often will dictate your ability to come into different situations and engage with other human beings in ways that build relationship. And those relationships will often power the work itself. So we seek to, through this program, what we do is we seek to put, we want to build a cadre of doers. So people who are policy savvy, STEM experts that can engage and advise on policymaking and implementation that serve society. That's what we're seeking to do. And so the program, let's see. There we go. So you gain a lot of knowledge, and this program goes a long way to teaching you a lot about yourself, and you're going to get the experience with the different branches. I'm sorry, I think my slides went a little excited on me. So you're going to get firsthand experience with different branches of government, the balances of power, federal budget, policymaking processes, procedures, understanding different policy, the different folks who are engaged in policymaking and implementation. And my slide deck keeps jumping, so I'm just going to assume this is the internet and text way of telling me to speed it up. So this is the Science and Policy Resources page. This is going to be useful for you if perhaps you're interested in this program. Great. Perhaps you're interested in other programs. Perhaps you are not a citizen. You have to be a U.S. citizen to come into STPF. Perhaps you're not a U.S. citizen, but you're interested in understanding what other possibilities are out there. This is a good place to go for resources because you can filter results by the type of science, as well as citizenship requirements. So it's a useful space. And then I want to close out with something that I think is valuable. There are a lot of different opportunities that can give you the kind of perspective that I've talked about. And I've talked to you about one, STPF, but there are multiple others. There is a mass media science and engineering fellowship that I actually get to oversee as well, that actually puts people into mass media outlets for 10 weeks each summer so that they can see science journalism, they can engage in science journalism firsthand. It's been very beneficial because, as some of y'all might know, a number of newsrooms have lost access to science reporters and folks with science journalism expertise. So being able to put these fellows into these mass media outlets has a huge impact on being able to communicate science effectively through journalistic media, through journalism, through the work of it, what journalists do. There's also the Presidential Management Fellowship, which is one that is housed within the U.S. government. So within the federal government, this is another one that puts people with a variety of backgrounds, including scientific and technical backgrounds, into federal agencies for, I think, 2 years, and they get to rotate around. That is a very useful one, especially if you're about to be finished with your graduate degree or finishing a postdoc. I'd say you want to check that out, see if you're eligible. The Horizon Institute for Public Service. Thank you, Twyla. The Horizon Institute for Public Service is another organization that puts folks into the federal government through a fellowship model. And they also have a lot of resources that are helpful to folks who are technologists by training. Tech Congress is another that follows that same sort of model, with putting technologists specifically to work in Congress and in spaces like that. As well as, I think they also have an option where they put people in think tanks too. Activate and Pharma Foundation, I want to mention those two to y'all because not everybody wants to go into policy or wants to go into research administration or management. So Activate is a really cool program that actually focuses on building entrepreneurship within STEM professionals. So that actually gives you, if you've got a concept that you want to commercialize, something that you want to build on, you're interested in becoming an entrepreneur, you putting those STEM skills to use in that way, that is an opportunity that can be made available to you. And that's an organization. You can just Google Activate. It's an Activate fellowship, and you can find information on that. And I think I might have hyperlinked these as well in the slide deck. And then the Pharma Foundation. This is, Pharma is an overarching sort of coalition organization of pharma companies. They have a foundation that actually supports research grants to early career researchers. And I think they might be about $60,000 a year or something along those lines. So that is also another way to get funding outside of, I think, what are typical sorts of routes. So there are lots of ways to advance your career and kind of transform it into whatever you want it to be. I hope that this has been useful for y'all in terms of giving you an idea of what that can look like. So I will end this on some information about the S&T Policy Fellowships here at AAAS. And I'm going to stop sharing here. And if y'all want to come off of mute and ask questions, that is fine. Tom and Christy, let me know if I've missed anything. I think I tried to answer questions that I saw in the chat, but I'm happy to take more questions now.
Sure. If people, do have questions, use that Q&A function on your Zoom screen. It may be located under the More button on your screen, and then just hit Q&A. And we've got a couple in already. One to ask you, Rashada, thank you for that amazing presentation. That was absolutely incredible. Hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. So thank you. You talked about receiving harsh feedback and receiving good feedback along the course of your career. Do you have any advice for others about how to embrace feedback, even when it's tough or not what you want to hear?
One thing is if you haven't already, find a therapist. I say graduate school is you benefit a lot from a space to process some of these things, because oftentimes the feedback that we get in graduate school and in our postdoc spaces, it's hard not to take it personally, right? You are a person, you take things personally. But keep in mind that the person that you are working with and working on things with, think about where they are situated in terms of the product that you might have produced and where that feedback is coming from. So think about put it in context, right? So you might get really harsh feedback from an advisor about a blot that you ran, an assay that you ran, right? And they might be like, this is terrible, this is horrible, you're the worst, so on and so forth. But then if you go run another blot and they don't say all those things again and the blot is fine, chances are you weren't the worst, you weren't terrible. With that first thing, right? Chances are that first thing was not as terrible as they said. Sometimes there's hyperbole that we can take out of things that folks may say to us that can really pull you down into a less than productive space when you're considering that feedback. Consider this. Also, when you're taking that feedback into consideration, take what works and leave what doesn't. Some of it might be very helpful for you and some of it might not be. Sometimes people give us feedback and they're actually editorializing on things we did not necessarily ask them for their opinion on. That's okay. They get to. We do it too as human beings. But think about taking what works and leaving what doesn't. And I'm going to add one more thing to you that is from a Zen story. My husband got me a book about like Zen teachings and stuff. And this is a story called The Muddy Road, where these two monks are going, it's rainy season, going somewhere. They stop at an intersection. There's a lovely young woman in a beautiful outfit who's trying to cross, but it's the rainy season, it's muddy, and she'll get everything dirty. One of the monks picks her up and he takes her across the street. He's like, you can't cross. He picks her up, takes her across the road, he sits her down, and then he and the other monk keep traveling. The monks have taken vows of chastity. They're not supposed to touch people, but he did that. He touched her, he sat her down, and they went on about their business. Hours later, when they've laid down to rest for the night, the other monk looks at him and says, how could you do that? You know we're not supposed to pick women up. We're not supposed to touch women, but you did that. How could you do that? The monk who picked her up says, I set her down all the way back there. Have you been carrying her this whole way? Think about what you carry from the feedback people give you. Sometimes it's not useful stuff to carry. Is that along the lines of what you were hoping for, Tom?
That's a good one. Thanks, Rashada. Another question in here, which you may see on the Q&A screen. You mentioned you did 2 postdoc appointments. You see that one?
Yeah. So this person asked about the 2 postdoc appointments and how do you balance applying for a second postdoc positions versus what you really want to do. I think one thing that is going to be very valuable for you is the requirements of that job. Sometimes I know jobs are requiring nowadays multiple postdocs or multiple postdocs for a longer period of time. What you can do is look at that postdoc, look at the positions that you're seeking to go into, right? Those faculty positions. What are the skills that they're asking for? And really think about being clear and incisive about how you talk about the experiences you've had. If, in fact, doing a second position is not going to give you skills that are useful to you. Think about why you would go into a second position. If it's simply for the years, think about having a conversation with that institution, trying to understand what it is they are seeking to do, what is possible for you to come in with, what kind of skills might they be open to you building. The reason I'm saying that is because if you are trying to be competitive, right? The competitiveness is about meeting the job requirements, but it's also about meeting the spirit of the job requirements. So search a little bit more to figure out what is the spirit of the job requirement, and is a second postdoc actually going to help you do it, or is it likelier to help you do it? That way you can kind of figure out, is it worth it for me to do this, or might I want to try something that is maybe less of a traditional postdoc and is more of a directed opportunity that will get me closer to the actual skills I'm seeking, so that you're not doing postdocs because they're available, or you need to have a job, or you need to make money, but because you are actually building towards the career that you want. And then I think I see a second one in here about how was the knowledge and expertise from chemistry and general medicine, the General Medicine Institute, transfer over to food and agriculture? Could you elaborate on how to frame those skills that transfer across different fields topics? Most might think they need to have deep knowledge in the exact research that an organization or institute handles in order to join. So that is a good question. You don't always need that. What you want to demonstrate, a lot of times, what I could demonstrate in thinking about going into this position from where I had been with my chemistry knowledge and my chemistry insights, was I knew how to go into a new field and how to become facile relatively quickly. So I knew how to go in, how to read the papers that were relevant, how to look for expertise, how to scan the knowledge and synthesize some understanding of it. That is a key piece if you're going to shift from one field to another, as well as understanding how you do that. So being able to talk about the fact that you have done it, here's what I did, here's how I was able to, and here's what I knew was important to do it. Informational interviews of a different sort are very helpful here. Being able to talk about your ability to go into a new space and to learn, and how actually that brings a lot of benefit, I think can be a really important facet of going, transferring across different fields. Most of us know how to set up a research project. We know how to evaluate a potential hypothesis. We know how to present on that. We know how to plan experiments out, project management. Those are often skills that go across subject matter expertise areas. So think about what is it that you have actually developed. Peter Fiske, Fiske, used to do a lot of this work talking about the skill sets that folks who are coming out of graduate school often have. And there are likely some older resources that will give you some sense of how to do that with a little bit more detail than what I'm able to give right now. Let's see. I see some questions. Let's see. So if you're currently a postdoc on an academic PI track, can you still participate in AAAS and government policymaking? There are ways to participate. So AAAS, you can become a member, and I encourage you to do so. There's a lot of policy alerts and information that AAAS pushes out, and other scientific societies do this too. So let's say that you are specifically in physics and you're interested in signing up with the American Physical Society or Physics Society, like APS. There are lots of different ways to do that, but it is very helpful to get involved with an organization that can help give you some summaries as well as some calls to action that can give you an idea of where the government policymaking has some places for you to plug in. So oftentimes government policymaking involves things like requests for information, which are often great places to give insights. Tom and I were actually on that NIH group that was focused on postdoctoral training that he mentioned earlier. And the NPA was a great way for folks to know about what was going on and to be able to potentially participate in seeing what was happening. I think Tom mentioned some surveys and things like that y'all participate in. That's often something that goes into policymaking, is that kind of information gathering as well. And I see a question here, and thank y'all for the kind words about my talk. What was your approach to explore and have these different really valuable jobs throughout your career? How did you decide what job to go for? Any tips for postdocs who did not want to be in academia but aren't sure what they want to do next? So I would say the approach was, so something that helped me a lot, and I'll just be very blunt about this. This is where I talked about trauma in graduate school and getting a therapist. I had a point in my first postdoc where I realized like I was having to have that conversation with myself to make myself get out of the car. And I realized that that was not a good place to be because I had worked too long and too hard. So then I began to think about what is it that I truly want and what is it that I can manage en route to what I want. So a few things I realized was that I could stand to be in a position that was a year or, maybe less stable than a steady job. So something that was just a year, 12 months, whatever, if it meant that I was going to gain skills that made me more competitive for positions where I wanted to be. So when I mentioned cold calling people and doing informational interviews, I started asking people, what do you need to do? One of the things people told me about policy, which I think is quite valuable, is DC is a very smart place to do it. Get in the room. So figure out if there's a position that you can shift into that would allow you to be in the DC area, even if it's temporary. Think about that and then get into the room and start to reach out and talk to people. That's where networking might come in. But overarchingly, what you're trying to do is to learn as much as you can about the possible careers that you could embark on and the folks who might very well be allies and advocates for you as you do. So having those conversations with them, I think sometimes you want to start with figuring out what is the risk that you can manage, and that will often help you figure out, again, to that question's nuances about like which position would I take. So I knew for myself it was important to me to know what I was going to be doing for a year, but I also understood I could manage some risk. I had an appetite for some risk outside of that, as long as I had that year to kind of figure things out and get my ducks in a row. I'm also seeing a couple of other questions here. So postdoctoral fellowship information too, but that resources slide that Chris also reposted, there very well might be some postdoc opportunities there. I would say look at the National Cancer Institute, NCI. I think their website would probably be nci.nih.gov or nci.gov, but check them out because that is a huge entity that looks at cancer research, has a number of different postdoctoral opportunities, as well as information about other opportunities that could be useful for you. I'm just trying to glance through questions and give stuff to folks. So what does a science policy position look like versus other science adjacent fields? Policy involves a lot of relationship building. You want to understand who people are, who they're advocating for, what they're seeking to do, what their goal is. So if you are curious about other human beings and trying to figure out how to work with them, policy can be a pretty cool space because you're going to spend a lot of time talking, collaborating, working with other folks. It is less insular than some other fields can be. There are some places where you can be a program manager for a particular research area and you work pretty much by yourself and with researchers in that field. You don't have a ton of collaborative opportunities. But in policy, collaboration is kind of the main thing that you're doing because you're not just thinking about what this policy is going to look like, you're also thinking about who this policy is going to affect. And that means you're going to be working with other folks to think about how to maximize the benefits and minimize harms. Let's see. Thank you, Tom, for putting in NCI's website. Advantages of working as a postdoc in the US compared to other parts of the world. I think that the NPA team can probably answer that better. One thing I would say that's really helpful is I think in the US, you can get a pretty wide perspective, a pretty broad perspective on the types of careers and things that you can do with STEM training that are outside of a traditional academic tenure track, research-based career. And I think that can be very powerful. There are whole positions where people just manage research consortiums, consortia. They manage consortiums. They manage different coalition or collaboratively based types of research partnerships. So there are all types of opportunities there. Some of them are at academic institutions. Most academic institutions have a federal relations office. They have a government relations office or some sort of space where they're thinking about what the policies are looking like that affect what they do. So those are often good places, but you wouldn't necessarily know that, I think, in a number of other spaces. But in the US, you often see that quite frequently. Tom, do you want me to keep answering questions or you want me to wind it down? I'm happy to answer questions. I've got time if people have them.
You say if we didn't have any new ones, I was going to thank you, Rashada, for your outstanding presentation and for opening up so much about your entire career and sharing vulnerabilities and strengths, and that's fantastic. So we really appreciate that at the NPA and for all who's joined in for all of NPAW. So thank you very much. And I hope all of you enjoyed this as much as I did. We will have the recording up on our site along with Dr. Alexander's slides that should be able to provide that will have the links in there because I know you put hyperlinks in there, right, Rashada, to be able to use. So
yep, and if there's anything folks need to know or any questions you get later, let me know and I'm happy to send more information, whatever's helpful. So thank y'all for spending time with me today. Thanks for thinking enough of me to want to be here. And y'all have a good rest of the day and appreciate yourselves. Have a good week.
thanks, everybody.